Good day, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on the future of financial centers. We're having a global launch of a report that has been conducted by 25 centers, in fact, slightly more, and looking really at the challenges facing society today and what it is that financial centers can do about them. I'm Michael Mainelli. I am the chairman of the Zien Group, and I was one of the contributors to this report, along with many, many others. And we're here today to hear many of those views and get a précis of the report, as well as to generate a discussion. The agenda that we have ahead of us is I will make a few opening remarks, if you don't mind, and I'll then be handing over to Arif Amiri, who's the CEO of the Dubai International Financial Center Authority, DIFC, as we call it. And after that, we will be having some remarks from Jochen Biedermann, representing the World Alliance of International Financial Centers. Unfortunately, his colleague, Jennifer Reynolds, has been ill today. She is the chair. But Jochen has kindly stepped in at short notice. And then the core of the presentation will be coming from Mike Wardle, who is the chief executive of the Zien Group, who helped pull together the study. And then we have approximately 25 minutes left for questions, comments, and answers. A few items I might point out. Yes, this is being recorded. The report itself is already available online. The slides we're showing today are already available online. And the recording will be up in about 2 working days, so you should be seeing it sometime Friday in time for the weekend. I would also like to say that during the Q&A, we're here online with you. We're not on Signal or email or whatever. So please do type your questions into the chat room facility here on the GoToWebinar system. All of those questions, along with your email, will be shared with all of the participants. So if you want to get hold of Arif or Jochen or Mike or me, just type something in there and we can do that. But hopefully we'll get to engage during the Q&A. And I already, in fact, have a couple of comments and questions from members of the audience there. Now, I would just like to set the scene briefly, if I might, by looking at where we drew this evidence from. We, Zien, have 3 surveys, the Global Financial Centers Index, now in its 31st edition, which has for over 15 years been covering financial sector development, the Smart Centers Index, now into its 6th edition, and the Global Green Finance Index into edition 9. We also had immense cooperation and research capacity from the WAIFC, the World Alliance of International Financial Centers, and the DIFC. So it's been quite an amalgamation of a report. Now, for me, probably the core thing in the report is the notion that we began with what financial centers' obligation to society is. And we based quite a bit of this on a paper done in the Harvard Business Review by Karthik Ramana and Carol Henderson, where they were looking at, 10 years ago, what was a manager's obligation to markets? There's a moral obligation. Society has many, many ways of solving problems, taxation, command and control, what have you. But sometimes society thinks that financial markets are the right way to solve problems. I would take as an example, in 1997 at Kyoto in COP3, it decided that financial centers would, it was decided that financial centers would be used to deliver cap and trade systems to solve climate change. So that, I think, is a good example of why society has given something to the marketplace to solve, and financial centers are part of an integral part of that. It's all about trade, and that trade needs to be reported back to society. How are we doing? And it was, I think, from that notion that we took the idea of ensuring that this paper was tightly linked to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, all 17 of them. So with that sort of light introduction, I would like to hand over now, if it's possible, to Arif, if he's there online. We have been having some technical difficulties. Arif Amiri, CEO of the DIFC.
Yeah. We cannot open the PDF on this.
Yeah, we can open.
Michael, a couple of problems still with Ari's connection. Should we move on to Jochen and come back?
I think so. Jochen has kindly volunteered to step in. So Jochen Biedermann, picking up, as I said, for Jennifer, and we'll just switch to his slides there. Jochen, over to you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I really would like to send greetings from our chair, Jennifer Reynolds. As Professor Manelli said, she is unfortunately ill today and cannot speak to you. And yeah, let's hope she will be getting well very soon. I'm really privileged to present the white paper on the future of financial centers today. I hope you do not mind me starting by saying thank you to our partners. First of all, the Dubai International Financial Center, and Arif, if you can hear me, your team did really an excellent job. And of course, to Set Yen Group with their outstanding skills in analyzing our industry. Furthermore, I'm very grateful that to all our members that contributed to the white paper, first during the initial roundtable meeting at our annual general meeting in Dubai. And I still have fond memories of the lively debate we had, and later by contributing showcases and insights. Last but not least, let me thank my team for all their efforts in reviewing and promoting the white paper. Really very much appreciated. For those of you who do not know us yet, and hopefully these are not too many, let me introduce the World Alliance of International Financial Centers briefly. The World Alliance is a non-profit association registered in Belgium, comprising currently 26 leading international financial centers. There are 19 members and 7 observers across 4 continents. We organize a collaboration between leading financial centers worldwide. We run projects together and we exchange best practices. Furthermore, we jointly promote the vital role of financial centers in financing the economy, one of the core topics also of the white paper we published today. In the last 2 years, a large part of our work was related to the global pandemic. We discussed how global financial centers could support a swift economic recovery from the pandemic, and we made suggestions in areas like fintech and innovation, sustainable finance, financing of small and medium-sized enterprises, and regulation. You can download various publications on those topics on our website. Please also consider subscribing to our monthly newsletter or social media channels if you want to follow our work. All in all, we live in an increasingly complex world that is changing rapidly. Fortunately, our World Alliance members are united and work closely together with a strong cooperative spirit, which is really excellent news. The white paper of the future of financial centers allows us to stay focused on what matters for financial centers, now and in the future. While the priorities, of course, might differ among our members, they all have a strong ambition to develop themselves, meeting the upcoming challenges and support their communities and national economies. And some of them even are ambitious to go up in the ranks of the Global Financial Center Index, of course. All our members agree that in 2030, financial centers have to be green, smart, innovative, customer-focused, digital, and inclusive. And they will play a critical role in attracting and retaining the best talent. All our members are committed to continuous collaboration and knowledge sharing to reach that goal. Finally, let me stress that I'm delighted that the white paper not only provides a vision of the future for financial centers, but also compares different types of financial centers and gives the historical background of financial center development. In my opinion, it's crucial to understand the past before looking into the future. Thank you very much, and please enjoy reading our white paper.
Thank you very much, Jochen. That's extremely kind of you to step in at short notice. All of the websites and links will be shared in the chat room and also at the end of the slide deck for all of you. But meanwhile, if I could, I'm pleased to welcome Arif Amiri, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Dubai International Financial Center Authority. Arif, would you like to say a few words, please?
Well, thank you so much, Professor. It's really great to connect. And really on behalf of the DIFC, I would like to really thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to start by saying that the global financial center or financial industries have met a dramatic wave of change. From the financial crisis in 2008 all the way to COVID-19 pandemic, to the rapid changes we've seen in technology and for demand for sustainable finance, all of these have led to a shift in the role of financial centers and their role to play, really. With this in mind, the DIFC decided to commission a white paper together with the World Alliance of International Financial Centers, WAIFC, and ZN Group as well. The contents of the white paper really originated from discussions we had at the AGM of WAIFC here in Dubai and in the heart of the IFC. During this meeting, a range of financial centers shared their insights about how they were designing policies, regulatory interventions to enable sustainable growth. Of course, the 4th Industrial Revolution, as well as human capital development. And today we are really delighted to be sharing that white paper and the findings within the white paper that really outline how financial centers around the world are addressing the big question facing society today with a shared vision towards 2030. As the initiator and the key contributor to the paper, I'm pleased to see that the approach of Dubai and the DIFC are taking is very much reflected in the overall direction and the findings within. Using Dubai and DIFC as a benchmark, over the last 2 decades, Dubai itself has diversified away from hydrocarbons. And of course, progressive policies and proving that building a foundation that supports innovation can lead an economy to surpass geographical and time and age constraints. We also recognize that consistent with other leading cities around the world, financial services and technology are among the sectors with the most potential to support the future economic growth. In the 18 years history of the DIFC, we have built a leading financial center in the Middle East, Africa, and South Asia region. A center with innovation at its core and focused on driving the future of finance. One of the key findings of the paper suggests that financial centers need to balance collaboration and, of course, competition to drive economic growth and address challenges and opportunities, hopefully, across societies. At DIFC, we believe that collaborating with others is the key to the future growth of the industry. We are steadfast in our views that financial centers must collaborate to encourage growth and sustainable finance, help provide the right environment for startups to really prosper, assist in the development of digital ID and KYC systems, attracting and retaining talent, and also to urge the development of international regulatory standards. In my white paper introductory comments, I mentioned that having the knowledge outlined in the report comes with great amount of responsibility. We also have a responsibility to make sure that we turn these findings within the paper into thorough and actions that are really turned into deliverables. Our joint activities will be instrumental in supporting economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, making that transition towards sustainable financial industry and driving innovation and supporting financial inclusion. At DIFC, we're looking forward to fulfilling our vision to drive the future of finance and to be a collective force for good. We want to thank our partners, WAIFC, as well as ZN Group, who showing their support and valuable insight and contribute remarkably to this white paper. We also like to welcome any thoughts you have or for how we can come together to address any of the topics highlighted. And now I'd like to hand it back to Dr. Johan, the Managing Director of WAIFC. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much, Arif. Both Arif and Jochen will be coming back for the Q&A discussion, but now let's move on to the core of it. This is Mike Wardle, the Chief Executive Officer of ZN, to present the key findings. So, Mike, we'll turn our cameras off and over to you.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you indeed to Arif and Jochen for those introductory remarks. I'm going to go through the key findings of the report. And the report, as Michael said earlier, is posted on the events page for this launch, or indeed on the DIFC website. As we've heard, the background to the report was that the report was commissioned by DIFC with a view to taking a look at where the next 10 years we're going to lead financial centres. And we held a roundtable discussion alongside the AGM of the WAIFC in October 2022 and have developed the white paper following the discussions held at that round table. And a key finding, I guess, is that financial centres and the organisations that represent them are spearheading efforts to strengthen financial markets, business environments, and innovation ecosystems, but with the goal of enabling sustainable global growth. We had a look, first of all, when we had our discussions around the challenges that are facing the financial system and the world. And the three key challenges we hit upon were demography, with changing populations, changing in different ways in different parts of the world. The challenge of the Sustainable Development Goals across the 17 areas which the UN has hit upon, where we need to make progress as a world society. And then the fourth industrial revolution and the whole question of digitalization and the way in which that impacts all aspects of our lives and all aspects of business. And financial centres collectively identified 4 areas where they can take action which will help to address some of these challenges. And those areas, which I'll go into in more depth later on in this presentation, are sustainability, the digital revolution, human capital development, and regulation. But first, some words about the development of financial centres over time. When we first started publishing the Global Financial Centres Index back in 2007, that was the first published report following research we'd done in 2005, we identified and rated 46 financial centres. In the most recent edition of the GFCI published in March, we now rate 119 international financial centres. And the key issue that correlates with the growth in the range and number of financial centres is this one shown on the slide. Trade as a percentage of GDP, that is taking into account population and economic growth, rose from 27% back in 1970 to 60% in 2019, so an increase of 33 percentage points over half a century. And trade and international trade requires international finance and provides opportunities for the development and growth of the financial sector and of new financial centres. And I guess this is also part of the process of globalization, the integration of a country's local financial system with global markets, leading to an increase in cross-country capital movement, the active participation of borrowers and lenders in the global financial market, and the use of international financial intermediaries. And all these services linking together local country systems with global systems are provided in financial centres, connecting investors with national financial market agents through their financial infrastructure. And a brief word on the kind of role that financial centres play. By way of definition, it's often said that financial centres are places with an intense concentration of financial activity that involves an interlocking set of sectors and transactions. And financial centres, or the financial ecosystem, brings together 3 groups of people or entities, along with advisors, consultants, lawyers, accountants, etc. The first of these groups are investors, people who commit funds with the expectation of financial returns. Guarantors, defined as entities that are insuring or reinsuring products or companies' operations and risks, and traders and other risk bearers, people buying, selling, and making markets and issuing securities. And financial centres and their representative bodies create clusters of expertise, clusters of data, which support the activity of these 3 groups. And the question is, what impact does a financial centre have? Why is it important to think of a place as a financial centre rather than as a disparate set of financial organisations? First of all, the whole point of the impact of clustering. There's quite a lot of evidence that clustering, not only in finance but in many other walks of life leads to innovation and better quality. And so clustering financial services in one place does seem to have that innovation impact. Financial centres influence both city and state economies directly. They can lead to higher GDP growth, they can lead to increased investment and tax revenue, and they lead to new jobs in financial and related professional sectors. And there are also indirect benefits from a financial sector's activities, market development, a higher quality of business environment, better institutions, including regulators and the court systems, macroeconomic stability, and a sense of urban development. And those are the reasons that people generate new financial centres and want to establish international finance in their centres. And Arif mentioned the ideas of both competition and collaboration. And financial centres certainly do compete for business to attract international firms to come and set up in their jurisdiction, but they also collaborate. They form a community with common action and a co-created future. And I guess the community response to the world challenges is really the focus of the white paper published today. And the concept of co-opetition, embracing both competition and collaboration is a key element for the future of financial centres. Because while financial systems build communities in their own ecosystem, they also build that community amongst each other with the purpose of serving society's needs. And if the financial system, financial centres are seen to be serving society needs, in effect, the social license to operate financial markets will be upheld. I mentioned the 4 areas of development where financial centres have a particular focus looking over the next 10 years. First of all, sustainability. And financial centres are encouraging growth in sustainable finance. They're leading multi-stakeholder groups locally and across borders to help develop sustainability strategies. And it's worth mentioning here the group run by the United Nations called Financial Centres for Sustainability, which brings together financial centres with this focus. Secondly, developing, publishing, socialising regulatory roadmaps to show the direction of travel on sustainable finance and to show how the markets will be shifting. Raising awareness of green transition dynamics, both domestically and internationally. And of course, financial centres represent places in the world at very different points in their transition pathway. Supporting the development of new financial instruments, including green sukuk, green bonds, green lending of various kinds. Contributing to national policy development with many financial centres sitting with government, with civil society and others to think through the issues. And supporting international cooperation around green taxonomies and green financial disclosure standards. And financial centres working together see themselves as key to keeping the pressure up towards moving finance towards a sustainable future. And Nicholas Mackel from Luxembourg for Finance commented on this in the report, saying specifically the role of financial industry is to help companies finance their transformation. It's speeding up the shift towards sustainable finance even further. And the report addresses the ways in which financial centres can address the sustainable development goals. It's about developing new products and services, about ensuring that markets are aligned to the development goals, greening financial markets, and building cooperation. The second big area for change is the digital revolution. And financial centres are encouraging regulatory change to enable digital finance. I think recognising that in particular in startups, there are various ways in which the regulatory framework can help to enable new ideas and new ways of working to get off the ground. Many financial centres provided fintech labs, office space at cheap cost or cheap licensing for new regulatory licenses to operate in their regime. They've supported the development of digital ID and know your customer systems, which are essential to ensuring the proper regulation of financial work. They've backed initiatives to widen access to financial services and worked to ensure that regulations both incentivize innovation and ensure consumer protection, both of which are of enormous importance. And just to say that the recognition of how technology is changing things in Busan, SB Shin, who's the Director of International Finance Division there, have been concentrating on retaining a local talented workforce, particularly with a focus on technology and involving the local university sector. The third area of development is human capital development. We're working to attract and develop talent through outreach to schools and universities, using attractive visa and residency regimes and partnerships between businesses and universities. And sometimes when we're talking about international financial centres, we use the phrase, you can't really be international without international people. And so both developing homegrown talent and making it possible for people to move to your financial centre, both of those are important. It's recognising that digital education is very important, and so if you're going to upskill your existing workforce or develop new ways of training your future workforce, it's important that we think about the skills that are going to be needed for the future, including digital skills alongside core finance knowledge. Retention of talent is a key issue for financial centres, supporting local workforce and continuing to provide an attractive working environment, and reskilling talent through CPD and developing partnerships internationally. Nick Barrigue in Kigali talked about this, of building their own domestic talents alongside a visa regime to attract international talent, and building partnerships with other centres to learn. The final plank of development for financial centres is around regulation. And financial centres see themselves as having a role to sit between and make links between regulators and market participants to ensure that regulatory changes are planned and understood. Urging the development of international regulatory standards. So this is where financial centres working together can look at the way that regulatory standards need to change. Making sure that commercial insights are fed back to the regulators and through encouraging competition. So these are the four areas of activity which are taking place, and Hubertus Werth from Frankfurt Main Finance made clear in the paper that innovation, he believes, is the best consumer protection, and there are ways to promote innovation through clustering, but also through regulatory change. So where does that leave financial centres by 2030? The vision set out in the white paper is that financial centres will be doing their utmost to support a more sustainable global future to address the challenges I mentioned right back at the beginning of my presentation. But the key words, I guess, that describe where financial centres need to get to is, first of all, to be green, prioritising the sustainable economy, reducing carbon emissions and promoting green solutions. Being smart, able to understand and managing increasingly complex technological approaches, both to open up new markets and offer improved services. Being innovative and client or customer centric. A regulatory and legal environment allows for innovation, balancing regulatory cost and consumer protection. Digital, with the majority of services provided via special platforms, apps, using the technology available to make it easier to engage with financial services. Inclusive, making sure that you're open to all comers, and with support for those wishing to set up businesses in your marketplace, and being places that offer a good quality of life, that attract high-performing people who want to come and live and work and develop the financial centre offering. Many thanks, and I would like to hand back to Michael Manelli to manage the Q&A session.
Well, thank you very much, Mike, for that overview of the document. And if I could ask Arif and Jochen to join us here. We've got quite a few people online, actually, well over 100, and we've got quite a few questions already. Mike, I think it might be very helpful too if you could just leave us back one slide and behind, because I think that final slide of yours is a good reminder of what we're after: being smart, innovative, digital, inclusive, and quality of life. So let's get cracking. Noble Mesri has an excellent question, starting there with just green itself. Many high-tech solar and carbon-free projects are in vital sectors such as building, electrothermal, manufacturing, engineering, and they all need investment funds to start soon. How can financial centers help on that score? May I ask, Arif, would you like to tackle that one?
Hi, I hope I don't disappoint anybody. This is Christian, head of Group Strategy Innovation. I'm stepping in for Art, who unfortunately had to move to the next meeting. I think it's a great question. I think, how can financial centers help with this? I think I can tell you how the DIFC is helping with this. We have a number of different initiatives, some of them regulatory driven from our regulator, the DFC, which has a task force for sustainable finance, looking at what standards to implement, what reporting is required, and how that can merge with what is happening on the global level in terms of reporting standards, as well as accessing green financing. In fact, in the DFC, we have now over 11% on Nasdaq Dubai that is green or sustainable financing. I think that's kind of what the regulators can do. On the other side, what we're doing is we have established in 2019, together with Dubai Financial Markets, the Dubai Sustainable Finance Working Group. That's a public-private sector working group that is working on, one, educating the market and creating practical kind of tools for the industry on understanding what actually sustainable finance, sustainable issuing of debt is, how it works, and really together with the industry drive the topic forward. And I think those are two examples of how we, at least in Dubai and in the DIFC, drive green finance and sustainable economy, both on the regulatory side as well as kind of jointly with the industry together.
Thank you very, very much for that. Jochen, I think there's a good question here from Bob McDowell, and we're going to have a few questions on related subjects, but just quickly, do you see more financial centers spawning over the next 5 years, or do you see a trend to consolidation?
No, I think the number of financial centers expanding, and also we can see it whenever you publish your global financial center index. Usually you add a few names at the end. I think we are well beyond 100, if I remember the last one correctly. I see a lot of growth personally in Africa. My personal opinion is, while maybe we still can call this decade a decade of the Asian financial centers, which are prospering, latest the next decade, but maybe already the second half of this decade will be a decade, in my opinion, of the African financial centers. There will be a lot of growth there. There will be a demand for new financial services, not only for financing sustainable finance, but also to help a new middle class in many African countries to prosper. We see several African countries and their financial centers and actors to leapfrog developments. If you just look at the number of fintech unicorns, I think Africa now has something like 7 or 8 fintech unicorns from places like Nigeria, Egypt, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of innovation coming, and usually the large financial institutions, they follow where the growth is. So they will step by step move in and help the local financial centers to prosper and to connect themselves.
Very good, thank you. I do agree with you. I expect to see a continued growth, maybe not quite as rapidly, but when people want to develop finance is crucial to trade, and the minute that starts, you begin to see the rise of the centers. Clearly, there'll come a point when it will level out, though. Meanwhile, returning to that theme of globalization, I've got a question here. Purser points out that supply chain issues and other factors are driving products and services to greater local sourcing, localization. Is the financial sector immune from this trend? And then Bob McDowell is wondering, what particular role do you believe financial centers will play in meeting the challenges of prospective global trade fragmentation? So, sort of a two-part question. Are they going to get local, and what role can they play? And Salman, may I turn to you?
Yes, hi, good afternoon, and it's very good to be here. Look, there's no question that globally you are seeing some signs of decoupling of the global, the supply chains established during a good 25 or 30-year period of globalization. From our vantage point in financial services in the DIFC, however, we're not seeing any significant decoupling at all. In fact, let me give you a couple of examples of how the globalization is continuing to impact us in a positive way. For example, we are now seeing for the last 6 months a significant inflow of what we call alternative asset class managers. So we're seeing a significant inflow of hedge fund managers, let's say from Asia and let's say North America. Now, one of the significant drivers of that is the global competition and the global movement for talent. So it is a well-known public fact that many of the financial centers in North America, or such as on the coasts, are losing people to the South and the Midwest of the US. So for example, there's a flow of financial services talent out of New York into places like Miami, and tech into Austin and other places. So that's being driven by a number of factors ranging from cost of living, quality of life, and COVID. And once that happened, you saw a decoupling of what people do and where they do it. But because the market for talent is still global, places like the DIFC and others certainly, and Dubai become very, very attractive. And so using the specific example here, in financial services, we are seeing that movement of talent out to places like DIFC. And so we're seeing the establishment of hedge funds here, driven not just by sales relationships, but by portfolio management relationships. So that's one example. Other quick examples include significant pipeline of financial services firms that are in the advisory space, that are here to take advantage, for example, of the growth in our public markets. We are seeing significant inflows from global firms in the brokerage space. So to summarize, while in various supply chains, particularly in high tech and manufacturing, there may be some dislocation, in financial services, I can tell you thus far, we're not seeing any significant changes in that space.
Okay, well, thank you. Mike, a question for you from Richard Parler. It's quite a good one, pointed. He's curious if there's no specific mention of the importance of integrity of financial markets in the fight against financial crime. Is this an oversight, somebody else's problem? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it was maybe glossed over, but when I was talking about the digital revolution, I was talking about the introduction of digital know your customer, digital ways of shoring up the international cooperation to fight fraud and other matters. So maybe it didn't come out quietly in my presentation, but it's certainly there, and financial centers are very aware of their activity to protect the integrity of financial services, to protect consumers alongside promoting innovation. And it's balancing those two things and ensuring absolutely that the integrity of the system is maintained, which financial centers collectively would see as one of their goals. So I didn't draw it out explicitly, but it's certainly there, and certainly part of the thinking that underlies where financial centers see themselves. And part of the reason for that is financial centers very much know that without a reputation for integrity, business will stop flowing towards their institutions and towards their cities and their countries. And so there really is a very strong driver to ensure that good practice is maintained in those areas.
Okay. Yeah, and your inclusive point touches on it. And of course, I was also pointing out at the very beginning what I see as the integrity, the responsibility to society. We've got a couple of offers here for help, for assistance, I should say. An interesting question here from John Taylor. which I think is directed probably to you, Salman. What help would the DIFC and other financial centers most need to assist them in achieving the sustainable growth that the speakers all mentioned?
Well, okay. That's a good one. So one of the things that we have started to do particularly well, I have to say, is, you know, we are a client-driven organization, and so what we try to do is we try and learn from what our clients are looking to do, right? So if for example we saw or sensed a latent interest in fintech, well, guess what we did? We consulted with the fintech community in order to develop the regulations that then drove growth. So I think one way to answer that question is we are, as a financial center, moving in the direction of a lot more partnership, collaboration, and enablement rather than simple establishment. Okay, what that means is that we will continue to work with clients who are looking to establish platforms for growth here. And so I guess to answer the question in terms of help, we're always very, very interested in you know, enhancing our knowledge and awareness of the kinds of issues that our clients are looking at, whether it is the kinds of things that Christian referred to when it comes to sustainable finance, or in either the E or the S or the G. We consult regularly with top technology firms in the world to ensure that our knowledge and awareness of innovation continues to sharpen. So I think that kind of engagement is something that we will continue to look forward to from different segments of the clients that we serve.
Thank you. Jochen, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes, with pleasure. So in terms of sustainable finance, of course, financial centers need to help, first of all, in finding the right instruments for investments into sustainable finance. I also have the first question in mind. So this can be project finance, this could be financial instruments like green bonds, this could be other instruments. So then, of course, in the cluster of a financial center, there's the legal and tax advice and all the other professional services which are necessary. And then financial centers, in one way or the other, run markets. So whether these are exchanges or other marketplaces, primary and secondary markets, and also help to evaluate whether these are ESG data or other standards, evaluate the project, the products, the companies related to it. So I think there are a lot of tasks different financial actors perform, and all this together then is a sound offering for financing, you know, sustainable projects and sustainable investments.
A really good question, Mike. You ended on the kind of the inverted regulatory U-curve there, the balance between innovation and the Wild West. Mike Barrow, who's got quite a bit of experience in this space, says, can't more be done to simplify regulation across the world? Now, of course, regulations are required, but overcomplicated and thick regulations increase risk. He points out, I agree with him, the danger of comfort in complexity, which we all thrive on. It's a professional center, and it's very complicated to launch products, to get a prospectus out, etc. He also points out they should include simplifying things like visa processes. So what do you feel about simplification? I'll start with you, Mike, but I think I think everybody can have a go at this one.
Sorry, I was muted for a moment. Yep. I think the main thing is to think about ways that financial centers are trying to work across borders and boundaries, and bring together regulators across borders and boundaries. Jochen, I'm sure, will talk about the memorandums of understanding developed across financial centers, but there is quite a lot of activity to try to build those links to ensure that there is regulatory read across. Some of these are kind of regulatory bridges so that people who are already regulated in one market have an easier access into a new market because the regulators have developed those links and those consistent standards. So it is a matter of looking to continue those regulatory functions. I think in the world of sustainable finance, there's quite a lot of activity going on, and the fact that central banks are working together and regulators are working together across green finance around things like disclosure and the way in which markets are regulated and the way in which green bonds are certified and the taxonomy is put in place is a really good example of how you can try to develop more consistent regulatory approaches across a variety of markets. And I don't think any of us, apart maybe from DIFC, are regulators. But I think the point about regulatory complexity or simplicity is well understood. And the complexity of financial systems, I guess, means that it proves somewhat difficult some ways, both to achieve simplicity, but also to achieve the level of protection that consumers demand.
Okay, move on to Jakob and then over to Christian. Jakob, you wouldn't mind having to go on the simplification of regulation, but don't forget Martin's point about visas as well, please.
Yeah, maybe I can chip in a little bit. I think it's a big topic. I fully agree with you that regulations are very important, but in many times regulations and inconsistency across regulation, or most of the time, I would say regulatory uncertainty rather than just inconsistency is a big challenge for organizations to grow and to expand. And I think there's a number of things to address this. I think one are the global associations and organizations working together, and we're all regulated. The DFC is part of GFIN, the Global Financial Innovation Network, working with groups like BIS. We work very closely with IIF. We have our own DFC Innovation Panel where we have regulators as well as international institutions like Wharton Stephenson Center for Finance Innovation, Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance, and many others to kind of bring together the global thought leadership. But in traditional financial services and fintech, as well as in ESG and sustainability, I think there's definitely still too much inconsistency and too many kind of frameworks globally that are slowly merging with ISSB and a few others kind of taking the lead there. So I think standardization, simplification is very important. I think the other point to be made in this context is education of both sides. So it's not just educating the regulators about the new business models and about how to make it easier to collaborate across borders, but it's also important to educate kind of the industry, and especially kind of the innovation and new players, of the importance of regulations and how to efficiently work together and implement regulations. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity in terms of actually innovating in the way you comply. And regulations don't always have to sync up across borders, but you can do a lot of things to make it more efficient for companies to actually implement them. And we see some companies working on that, and I think we see some efforts that make that easier as well. On visas, I think Dubai and the UAE, I think, has taken a very strong position on that, has made it very easy for people to get visas to move to Dubai, work from the DIFC, work from Dubai. They introduced golden visas that are 10 years. For 10 years, they introduced them for different types of entrepreneurs, innovation, but also in the medical sectors for doctors and many other kind of professions. So I think this is something that Dubai has really done well, and others can maybe learn from that. But that is also one of the reasons I think many of the top talent and top organizations are moving here. And the last thought, maybe, I think the power, and there's different types of financial centers. There's kind of the organic ones, the traditional ones that just became a financial center but are not organized necessarily as a financial center. And then we have the special economic zones like the DIFC. And I think the benefit of this is, of course, across the board, from visas, regulations, all the way to what we discussed before in terms of oversight and regulatory RegTech and prevention. There's a lot of synergies of having a cluster of, we have over 550 regulated firms, over 550 fintech innovation firms, over 31,000 people working from the center. So there's a lot of efficiencies to deploy and cross-pollinate and share experiences and so on. So I think these clusters of organized, let's say, special economic zones or financial centers, I think will grow, and I think they drive a lot of the efforts when it comes to innovation, regulation, as well as kind of standard setting and so on.
Thank you. I've got two areas of questions in the time available. One is I do want to pick up on what we're going to do with this paper in a minute, but just before we do so, we're in a slight danger of pretending that everything across the world is homogenous and that all financial centers are kind of the same. And I'm just wondering if people could pick out a couple of points that they see are different in different regions. Jochen, you've got quite a wide view at WAIFC, but maybe you could talk a second or two about North America, Asia, Europe, and then perhaps I can, Salman, because you're in charge of business development, maybe your thoughts in the Middle East and Africa. Jochen, any specific unusual bits in various regions?
Of course, the priorities are different. So I said already in my initial statement, our membership is quite diverse, from the largest financial centers to smaller ones in Africa. I've mentioned that I see a lot of potential there, but of course, while in Europe, in North America, in other places, also at the top Asian financial centers, in Dubai and many other places, we discuss ESG, sustainable finance. We try to nurture and further develop the fintech ecosystem. There's discussion around blockchain technology. We discuss the use of artificial intelligence in finance, and even future topics like the metaverse, are discussed, and what role it will play in the financial industry. While in other places, in aspiring financial centers in Africa, in Central Asia, and so on, it's more about financial education. It's financial literacy. It's about the small services, giving access to financial services for rural population, enabling small and medium-sized enterprises to have alternatives to bank financing, and so on and so forth, right? So you could call it let's say the basic financial services, but with the opportunity, as I said, to leapfrog the classical way, how it was done in Europe and in North America, going directly to digital platforms, and avoiding all that kind of cash, check, whatever ways we used in Europe and North America and in parts of Asia in the past.
Great. And Salman, any specifically unusual trends in the MEA?
Yeah, I mean, I think Dr. Jochen's spot on. I mean, I think financial centers reflect or manifest obviously complex overlaps of demographic and economic and sociocultural contexts, and that's why whenever I'm asked the question, how should country A or B or C do a financial center, the answer is, well, it really depends. In the case of the DIFC, I think there are a couple of things maybe I would highlight that are probably a bit unique and maybe a bit different, right? So one is, being in the accident of birth and being in a place like Dubai, which actually and truly in every sense of the word is a trade and flows corridor for centuries, right? So it's in the ethos of the place, trading and being very responsive to commercial needs. And that's really important. But I think secondly, we are unusually aligned with the government's policy on economic growth. And sometimes, when financial centers emerge rather than established, right? That's a difference. So we were custom built to drive economic growth and to diversify the economy, and that alignment is, for us, has been very, very significant, because it allows us to, in a top-down fashion initially, ensure that all of the actions, regulatory, legal, commercial, are aligned to that objective. And once you get going, of course, then the center creates indigenous or innate skills that then self-replicate, as we have done, as Christian mentioned, in terms of the development of regulations that we didn't have, right? And then the other thing I'd say is that, you know, some financial centers are lucky, I think we are one of those, that we have the freedom to be able to innovate, right? There are many financial centers or regulatory systems that are constrained for many, many reasons, historical, legal, commercial. And we are one of those financial centers by virtue of the how we were established and the ethos of where we are. We're able to innovate. We happen to be in a region where the population is young, it's ambitious and young, and very able to innovate. So these are some things that I think make us a little bit different, perhaps, in the archetype.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, just before we close, I think the question on a lot of people's minds in the audience is, what are you going to do to drive the agenda that's put out in this white paper forward? What action are you taking? And I think if I could, I'll start with you, Christian, if that's all right. If we've got your sound there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I welcome everybody to kind of reach out to the DIFC, to someone, myself, to learn more. We have announced our strategy 2030, which has a number of initiatives to build new capabilities across all of the metrics that you've seen. We have COP27, COP28 in Egypt and then in UAE. So I think green ESG is a very important topic for us. We're driving that across the board as DIFC and as on a country level. In terms of digitization and innovation, we've become in the last 2 years the largest cluster of fintech and innovation companies in the Middle East, Africa, South Asia. We have just had our DIFC FinTech Week last week, over 2,000 people. I think the growth is now nearly 30% of growth is coming from that future finance sector, and we continue doing that. And I think the other part is collaborating with the network, with yourselves and other centers around the world, as we see financial services becoming more global and more decentralized in many ways. I think collaborating with many of the other centers is definitely on our agenda.
Right. And Jochen?
As I said before, all the topics we have mentioned in this white paper, our members address in one way or the other. There are different priorities. Certain topics matters more. What we do at the World Alliance, we help to exchange best practices. So we pick certain topics. For instance, last year and beginning of this year, we were doing a lot of work on the topic of the use of artificial intelligence in finance, with players like the World Economic Forum and NVIDIA, and exchanging thoughts and having best practices, discussing this in webinars and so on and so forth. In the same way, we pick up other topics which matters for financial centers. Let me just name central bank digital currencies, which is in all our minds, and we think about what will be the changes. Sustainable finance, I will not mention again. I've mentioned it many times already. In all its flavors, we discuss and exchange best practices, and also again, I said future-looking topics like metaverse and others. So linking together what is done in our membership, letting some members see how other members approach it. It's not only helps those members who maybe haven't met so much experience, but also helps to develop towards global standards. So if you know how the others approaching it, it's more likely that we all will end up with global standards, which will be beneficial later to connect the different financial centers and their infrastructure.
Great. Thank you all. We've come close to the end of time, but a very quick, short question for Mike. Mike, all good research ends with there's a need for more research. What would be the sequel or son of the future of financial centers if you were to address this again in 2 years' time?
That's a very, very good question. I think the main planks of the challenges are not going to change. So demographic sustainability and the fourth industrial revolution are here for quite a while. I guess the question in 10 years' time will be far more, how can we eradicate existing brown finance, which focuses on fossil fuel, rather than how can we go green finance? I mean, there should be, if we are successful, a shift in the system, so that the great majority of finance is green, and the real focus will be how do you eradicate the remaining fossil fuel for finance that's in the system. So I think there'll be a shift in emphasis towards eradication of those things and getting rid of the final vestiges. And what I hope indeed is that financial centres will have managed to cooperate over regulatory systems even further than they have already managed to do, and it becomes a little more seamless to set up a business wherever you happen to find yourself in the world, and wherever, through whichever technology you're doing that virtually. And so it will be a matter of consolidation of regulatory approach. I think that's the two things that I pick out.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We'll just move to our final slide here, and may I say we've come to the end of time. I'd like to thank all of our panelists, of course, but also you, the audience. It's been great to get a lot of your input and feedback here. We hope that you find the report useful. We hope you share it with people. But if I could join with you, the audience, in thanking Salman, Christian, Arif, who sadly had to go away, and Jochen, and you, Mike, as the principal author. It's been a fun and interesting session, and we look forward to seeing this agenda moving all of the world's financial centers together in some type of harmony, a little bit of competition for sure, but a little bit of collaboration as well. Thank you all.